Welcome to Dark Whispers. October in the Appalachian Mountains carries a chill unlike any other. The leaves, painted in fiery reds, deep oranges, and gold, fall silently to the forest floor. Mist curls around the gnarled trunks, hiding secrets older than the towns nestled in the valleys below. The mountains seem alive in autumn, not with wildlife alone, but with whispers, soft, urgent, unplaceable whispers that trail through the trees. On one late October afternoon, a hiker named Daniel set out alone on a trail near the Tennessee-North Carolina border. He had been trekking for hours, the sun low on the horizon, casting long shadows through the dense hardwood forest. The trail he followed was rarely traveled, and the silence pressed against him like a living thing. Every so often, the crunch of dry leaves beneath his boots sounded unnaturally loud. He brushed it off as a mind playing tricks. He had been alone long enough to start imagining the wind as voices. By the time he reached a narrow hollow cutting to the hills, a strange unease had settled into his chest. The air grew colder, sharper, and the usual earthy scent of moss and wet leaves was joined by something acrid, like smoke from a distant fire, but without fire. As he moved further into the hollow, he noticed the trees bent unnaturally, their branches intertwining overhead to form a sort of cathedral of shadows. Daniel paused. His instinct screamed at him that he wasn't alone. A sudden rustle of leaves behind him made his heart skip. He spun around, but there was nothing, just the trees, swaying in a wind he couldn't feel. Shaking his head, he reminded himself that isolation could warp perception. Hikers' tales of haunted trails were just that, tales. But the stories that clung to Appalachia were not always born of imagination. He pressed on, the path narrowing. Then he saw it. A figure, barely visible through the mist, standing motionless among the trees. At first, he thought it was another hiker, but something was off. The figure didn't move like a person. It didn't blink. Its posture was unnervingly rigid, and its head seemed too large for its body, tilted at an impossible angle. Daniel froze, every nerve on edge. "Hello?" he called, his voice sounding strange in the stillness. No reply. Only the sound of leaves rustling, though no wind moved them. The figure remained. Then, in a blink, it was closer, not moving, yet somehow closer, as if the shadows themselves carried it forward. Daniel's instinct screamed at him to run, and he did. But no matter how fast he moved, the figure stayed just beyond sight, appearing in glimpses between the trees. Panic set in as he stumbled over roots and rocks, branches tearing at his jacket. He felt an unnatural heaviness pressing down on him, like the forest itself was trying to hold him in place. Finally, he burst from the hollow onto a ridge where the trees thinned. The sun was nearly gone, and the mist clung like a living shroud. And there it was, standing at the edge of the trail, the figure now fully visible. It wasn't human. Its limbs were too long, its skin pale, almost translucent, and its eyes. Daniel's memory would never forget those eyes. Black, empty pits that seemed to reach into him, pulling at his very thoughts. He screamed and ran, not stopping until he reached his car at the trailhead. He never saw the figure again. Friends who hiked the trail after him reported seeing the same hollow, silent, and empty, yet they spoke of the oppressive feeling that something watches you in that very spot. Locals whispered about the hollow walker, an entity said to appear only in October, when the boundary between the living and something else thins. Some say it feeds on fear, others that it merely marks its victims, who are later found days, even weeks later, wandering the woods, muttering incoherently about shadows with human shapes. Daniel never returned to the trail, but the whispers followed him home, echoing in the corners of empty rooms, brushing at his mind when he closed his eyes. The hollow walker of Appalachia does not always wait for the lost. Sometimes it follows patiently until it can reach you, even far from the mountains. And so, the story begins not at the edge of the forest, but at the edge of what we can see, what we can hear, and what we dare to imagine. The hollow walker is out there, and October is when its hunger is strongest. The Appalachian nights grow long in October, and the wind carries an unfamiliar chill, even to those used to the mountains. Locals often speak of Widow's Ridge with hushed voices, warning outsiders to stay away when the fog rolls in. Few dare approach the abandoned cabins clinging to the cliffs, yet stories of strange lights and whispered voices persist year after year. One autumn evening, a college student named Emily decided to test her courage. Armed with a camera and a notebook, she sought to document the legends for a local folklore project. The sun had just dipped below the horizon when she began the steep trek up Widow's Ridge. Her footsteps crunched on the dry, leaf-strewn trail, echoing eerily through the trees. Mist hung low, curling around roots and rocks like skeletal fingers reaching for her boots. After an hour of climbing, she saw the first cabin, barely more than a skeleton of its former self. Its wooden board sagged, windows shattered, and the roof had long ago given in to rot. The smell of decay was thick in the air, mingled with something faintly metallic. Emily hesitated at the threshold, shivering despite her jacket. She stepped inside, flashlight in hand. The cabin smelled of old smoke and mildew. Broken furniture lay scattered across the floor, and spiderwebs clung to the corners. But what caught Emily's attention was a wall covered in words, scratched deep into the wood. Leave now or join her. Her heart raced, but curiosity propelled her further. She moved toward a small attic stairway, each step groaning under her weight. Then she heard it, a faint melodic humming. Low, mournful, almost human. It came from the back of the cabin, somewhere between the main floor and the attic. Emily froze. The hair on her arms stood on end. "Hello," she whispered. The humming stopped immediately. Silence. Thinking it was a prank, she told herself it must be the wind or an animal. But then the scratching started, light, almost hesitant, moving across the floorboards upstairs. Emily's camera slipped slightly in her hands. She told herself it was her imagination, yet every instinct screamed that she was not alone. Suddenly, the cabin door slammed shut. The wind outside had been calm. She hadn't touched it. Panic rose in her chest. She tried the knob. Locked. She could feel the temperature drop, each breath forming a visible cloud. Then she saw her reflection in a shard of broken window glass. Pale, wide-eyed, but behind her, in the shadowed corner, a figure crouched low, hair long and matted, limbs unnaturally twisted. Its eyes gleamed faintly in the dim light, black pools with no reflection, staring directly at her soul. Emily ran for the stairs, only to find them stretched impossibly, leading into darkness that seemed to move and breathe. The humming resumed, louder, closer, wrapping around her ears like a living thing. She stumbled back to the cabin door, but it wouldn't budge. Behind her, the figure moved silently, sliding across the floor like liquid shadow. In desperation, Emily grabbed a heavy chair and smashed the nearest window. Cold wind rushed in, scattering leaves and dust. She leapt to the jagged opening, rolling onto the forest floor. Pain shot through her leg, but she didn't stop. She ran blindly down the ridge, branches tearing at her clothes and skin. The humming followed, fading only when she reached the bottom, and the cabin was far above, a dark silhouette against the moonlit fog. When she returned days later with friends, the cabin was empty, as though abandoned for decades. No scratches, no words on the wall, nothing. Locals claimed the cabin had been deserted for over 50 years, ever since a widow named Martha was rumored to have vanished into the ridge one October night. Some say she still wanders the cabin, seeking company in the living, her voice a lullaby that lures the curious into her trap. Emily never recovered her sense of ease on autumn evenings. Even in her apartment, shadows seemed to linger too long, and faint humming would echo from corners. She had survived Widow's Ridge, but the ridge had marked her, and that is the truth about Widow's Ridge. Some places in Appalachia do not forget. They do not forgive. They wait, patient and hungry, for the next soul to wander too close. October evenings in Appalachia grow darker sooner than most expect. The fog rolls down the hollows, curling around tree trunks and muffling even the loudest sounds. It was in one such hollow that a local farmer named Jacob first saw the Lantern Man, a figure whispered about for generations, yet dismissed by outsiders as folklore. Jacob was returning from his late-season harvest, his old truck rattling along the winding dirt road near Black Hollow. The night was unusually still, the kind of silence that presses down and makes every creak, groan, and whistle of the wind feel amplified. Then, from the corner of his eye, he saw a faint light dancing between the trees. At first, he thought it was a lost hiker or perhaps a reflection of his headlights, but the light moved deliberately, bobbing as though carried by a person walking just beyond sight. Curiosity and unease battled within him, and he stopped the truck. The light stopped too. In the darkness, he could just make out a tall figure, obscured by the fog, holding what appeared to be a lantern, an old, rusted lantern with flame flickering unnaturally, casting shadows that twisted along the undergrowth. Jacob felt a pull toward the figure, as if the hollow itself was urging him to follow. He stepped out, boots sinking into the damp soil, mist curling around his ankles. The lantern man took no steps forward, yet Jacob's mind insisted it was approaching. He called out, but no sound came from the figure, only the soft sway of the flame and the whispering wind. His instinct screamed to turn back, but something ancient and magnetic kept him rooted. Then the figure moved, or rather, the shadows moved. The lantern man glided across the clearing, but there were no footprints, no sound except for the crackle of the ethereal flame. Jacob noticed the light illuminated not the trees, but the air itself, mist curling unnaturally, forming shapes that seemed almost human. Faces appeared briefly in the fog, mouths open in silent screams. The sight froze Jacob's blood. He tried to step back, but his feet were caught, as though the earth itself had grown sticky. The lantern man raised his lantern higher, and the shadows condensed, flowing toward Jacob like dark water. He could feel whispers curling into his ears, voices from the trees, from the mist, from somewhere older than the mountains themselves. "Come with me! Come with me!" Panic overtook him. With a desperate surge, he broke free, stumbling over roots and rocks, the cold mist soaking his clothes. Behind him, the lantern light bobbed, floating through the fog, always just out of reach. By the time he reached the safety of his truck, the light had vanished. Jacob never spoke of the encountered outsiders, but he told neighbors and friends that something ancient and hungry walks Black Hollow in October. Locals know the tale well. The lantern man is said to be the spirit of a lost traveler or possibly a manifestation of the hollow itself, seeking to guide or trap those who wander too far after dark. Some say that if you see the light and follow it, you are never seen again. Others say survivors return, but changed, quieter, haunted, their eyes reflecting something they cannot explain. Years later, children playing near the hollow claim to see a faint light among the trees. Hunters tell the mist shifting oddly, as if hiding a presence that should not exist. And every October, old-timers swear the lantern man grows stronger, his light brighter, calling the curious and the lost alike. Jacob, however, never returned to Black Hollow. Even the thought of the fog brings a chill to his spine. He knows the lantern man is patient. It waits, and it does not forgive those who underestimate its reach. In Appalachia, the mountains are full of whispers, and some are older than the first settlers. The lantern man is one such whisper, an October specter that reminds all who hear of it. Not every light in the darkness is meant to guide you home. In the heart of Appalachia, abandoned coal mines are more than just relics of the past. They are tombs of forgotten labor, echoes of lost souls, and gateways to whispers that linger long after the pickaxes have been silenced. One such mine, nestled near the ridge of West Virginia's rugged hills, has a reputation that keeps even the bravest locals at bay. The townspeople call it simply the Hollow Vein. Late in October, a small group of amateur spelunkers, drawn by tales of haunted mines and ghostly sightings, decided to explore the Hollow Vein. Among them was Marcus, a history student fascinated by Appalachia's coal mining legacy, and his friends Lydia and Tyler. As they approached the rusted, half-collapsed entrance, the wind carried a strange metallic odor. It wasn't just a scent of rust or decay. It was heavier, like iron mixed with something far more ancient. The mine mouth loomed before them, a black, gaping wound in the side of the mountain. Marcus shined his flashlight into the depths. The beam caught the outlines of old timber supports, rotten and groaning under the weight of years. The walls were etched with scratches, some deep, some shallow, forming symbols that Marcus had never seen before. His research had taught him that miners often left marks, but these were different, irregular, chaotic, as if the rock itself had been clawed from the inside. They ventured inside, the beam of their lights slicing through the darkness. The air was thick, suffocating, and each step echoed ominously. About 50 feet in, Lydia paused. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. At first, Marcus thought it was dripping water, but then came a murmur, a chorus of faint, indecipherable voices that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The whispers grew louder as they advanced, ebbing and flowing like a tide, sometimes chanting, sometimes crying. Tyler, the skeptic of the group, laughed nervously. "It's just a wind through the tunnels," he said, though his voice wavered. The temperature dropped suddenly, their breath visible in the beam of the flashlights. Marcus's skin prickled with awareness. Something unseen was moving in the shadows, staying just beyond the light. Deeper in the mine, the whispers became distinct. Marcus could make out individual words, though their meaning eluded him. Leave, stay, forever, follow. The tunnel seemed to stretch endlessly. Every turn led to another identical fork, another patch of darkness, as if the mine was reshaping itself to trap them. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed behind them. Lydia spun around, flashlight trembling in her hands. There was no one there, but the footsteps continued, soft at first, then louder, circling them in a labyrinth of stone. The walls themselves seemed to pulse, shadows crawling along the timber supports like living creatures. A strange light appeared ahead, not from any lamp or torch, but an ethereal glow emanating from deep within the tunnel. It was faint like phosphorescent moss, yet it cast long, dancing shadows. The glow seemed to move toward them, shifting like liquid. The whispers crescendoed, now pleading, insistent. "Come, join, remain." Panic overtook the group. They tried to retrace their steps, but the tunnels no longer looked familiar. Each path they took seemed to twist them back toward the glowing light. Marcus shouted, and Lydia's terrified cries echoed off the stone, but no answer came, only the whispers in the cold, creeping darkness. Tyler tripped over a loose rock and fell hard. When he scrambled up, he swore the shadows had formed into humanoid shapes, reaching for him with elongated limbs. Marcus grabbed his arm, dragging him forward, but even as they ran, the sound of faint, dry scratching followed them, like fingernails against wood. Finally, they burst from the mine's entrance, gasping for air. The cold October night never felt so warm, the moonlight never so bright. They turned back to see the entrance, but it looked different, smaller, almost sealed, as if the mountain had swallowed it. The glow and whispers were gone, leaving only silence and the faint metallic scent lingering in the air. Marcus, Lydia, and Tyler never returned to the hollow vein. But locals insist the mine is not abandoned. Those brave or foolish. Enough to end a report hearing whispers in the rocks, footsteps in the dark, and lights that appear and disappear at will. Some who enter are never seen again. Others return, but they are changed, pale, muttering to themselves, eyes darting as if they see shadows invisible to everyone else. The mine, like much of Appalachia, holds its memories close. It remembers every soul that dared enter and keeps them in the echo of its tunnels. And in October, when the fog rolls down the hollows and the nights grow long, the whispers grow louder, waiting for the next curious mind to wander too far into the dark. October mists in Appalachia have a way of hiding what shouldn't be hidden. Roads twist through narrow valleys and over rushing streams, bridges spanning deep gorges like fragile lifelines between the hills. Red Creek Bridge, a rickety wooden structure over a deep ravine in southern West Virginia, is one such place. Locals rarely cross it at night, and those who do often speak of strange apparitions and inexplicable sounds. Jacob, different from the hiker in Part 3, a local trucker, was returning from a delivery late one October night. The road was nearly deserted, shrouded in thick fog, headlights barely illuminating the curve ahead. As he approached Red Creek Bridge, his radio crackled and fizzled, then fell silent. The bridge loomed ahead, its timber slick with autumn dew. Jacob slowed, sensing a chill crawl along his spine. Then he saw her, a woman, standing in the middle of the bridge, pale and soaked, her long dark hair clinging to her face. At first, Jacob thought it was a hitchhiker, though it was unusual to see anyone here at this hour. He honked, expecting her to step aside, but she didn't move. Her head tilted unnaturally, and her eyes, black, empty hollows, locked onto him. Jacob's heart pounded. He rolled down his window. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he called. No answer. The fog thickened, wrapping the bridge in a soft, suffocating blanket. He tried to shift the truck into gear and drive forward, but the tires skidded as though the road itself resisted movement. The woman lifted her arms slowly, pointing toward the edge of the bridge. Jacob froze. A sound broke the fog, a whispering laugh, soft but impossibly close. It seemed to come from all around, echoing off the water far below. Jacob glanced into the mist and saw not one woman but several. Figures emerging from the fog, their features twisted and indistinct, limbs long and moving with unnatural grace. Each seemed to glide above the bridge's surface, rather than walk. Panic surged. Jacob slammed the truck into reverse, but the wheels skidded, stopping just inches from the bridge's edge. The figures approached silently, their faces shifting in the fog, mouths opening in silent screams. He hit the horn, flashed the headlights, even cursed aloud, but nothing broke the spell. The fog seemed alive, curling around the vehicle, thickening with every heartbeat. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the fog lifted. The figures vanished, leaving Jacob shaking and drenched in sweat. The bridge was empty, quiet except for the distant rush of Red Creek far below. He drove off without looking back. The image of those hollow eyes burned into his memory. Locals say the woman is the spirit of a bride who fell, or was thrown, from Red Creek Bridge decades ago. Some claim she appears to warn travelers of danger. Others say she seeks company in the living, a spectral lament for her lost life. Witnesses often report feeling a sudden weight on their chest, a chill that penetrates to the bone, and whispers that seem to seep into the mind itself. Jacob never crossed the bridge at night again. Even years later, just the thought of Red Creek Bridge made his skin crawl. He had survived the encounter, but the memory stayed with him, as if the woman or the bridge itself had claimed a piece of him. Red Creek Bridge is still there, waiting in the foggy October nights. The warning signs are ignored by tourists, the brave, and the foolish alike. And sometimes, just sometimes, those who dare to cross hear the soft, sorrowful whispers and see a shadow moving among the mist, reaching for them to chill the Appalachian night. In Appalachia, the mountains hold secrets. Some are carved into the earth, some etched into the trees, and some linger in the fog, watching, waiting, and whispering. Some of the most unsettling horrors in Appalachia aren't hidden in the woods, cliffs, or mines. They lurk within the very homes where families once lived. The Miller farmhouse, perched on a lonely ridge in eastern Kentucky, is one such place. Locals rarely speak of it, and when they do, it's in hushed tones, warning outsiders not to enter during October. It was late afternoon when Claire and her brother Nathan, both in their 20s, arrived to photograph the abandoned farmhouse for a local history project. The air was crisp with the scent of decaying leaves, the horizon painted in shades of amber and crimson. The house itself was a testament to time. Faded wooden siding, windows clouded with dirt, and a porch sagging under the weight of years. Even from the outside, the structure exuded unease, as if it had absorbed decades of sorrow. Claire stepped onto the porch first, camera ready, though it creaked under her weight, echoing like footsteps in a hollow corridor. Nathan followed, flashlight in hand. As they entered, a musty smell hit them, a mixture of mildew, rot, and something faintly metallic. The floorboards groaned with every step, and dust rose in lazy cloud around them. The living room was empty, save for a few broken chairs and an old rocking chair in the corner. Yet something about the space felt wrong. Shadows linger where light should have fallen, moving ever so slightly as though alive. Claire's camera lens seemed to fog up inexplicably, capturing fleeting images of figures that weren't really there. Or were they? "Did you see that?" Nathan whispered. He pointed toward the staircase, where the shadows deepened. At the top of the stairs, a figure, small, hunched, pale, peeked out from behind the railing. When they blinked, it was gone. The siblings pressed on, documenting rooms one by one. In the kitchen, the cupboards creaked open and closed on their own, leaving a faint smell of burnt sugar lingering in the air. Claire's flashlight flickered, and in the dim glow, they saw scratches etched into the walls, words in jagged handwriting, Leave before she comes. A sudden thump echoed from upstairs. Nathan froze. The sound repeated, slow and deliberate, footsteps pacing back and forth. Claire grabbed his arm, but curiosity, or foolish bravery, drove them upward. The upper hallway was narrow, lined with peeling wallpaper and broken picture frames. At the far end, a door stood slightly ajar. Inside, they found a child's room untouched by time. A small bed, toys scattered across the floor, and a mirror coated in grime. As they approached, the mirror fogged, though the air was cold and dry. Words appeared, drawn in the condensation. She watches. The room seemed to pulse with cold energy, a suffocating weight pressing on their chests. Then came the whisper, a soft, melodic voice singing an old lullaby. Claire spun around. A woman stood in the corner, her long dress torn and filthy, hair covering her face. The lullaby paused as she tilted her head, revealing hollow, black eyes. The air grew icy, their breath forming clouds as they stumbled backward. The woman lifted her hand slowly, pointing toward the door. Panic surged. Claire and Nathan ran, crashing down the stairs and out onto the porch. Behind them, the house groaned as if sighing, the rocking chair swaying gently despite the absence of wind. They didn't stop until the farmhouse was far behind, hidden by trees and shadows. Locals say the Miller family vanished one October long ago, leaving the house to rot. Some believe the mother, grief-stricken over her lost children, lingered as a spirit, her sorrow turning into malevolence. Others whisper that the farmhouse itself has a will, feeding on those who dare enter, trapping their fear within its walls. Claire never returned to the ridge. Nathan avoids the road altogether in October. The farmhouse still stands, patient and silent, waiting for the next curious soul. And when the fog rolls in from the hills, it seems to breathe as if alive, whispering in the wind. She watches. She waits. In Appalachia, some houses do not forget, some do not forgive, and some, like the Miller farmhouse, have eyes that see even when you cannot. Some places in Appalachia are older than memory, carved by wind, water, and sorrow. One such place is known only as the Hollow of Lost Echoes, a dense, shadowed valley tucked between steep ridges in western North Carolina. Locals avoid it, claiming that anyone who enters hears voices that are not their own, whispers that mimic the dead, and footsteps that follow, yet never approach. It was late October when a group of college friends, Mark, Elise, and two others, decided to explore the hollow. They had heard the legends. Hikers vanishing, voices luring travelers to unseen caves, shadows stretching unnaturally. The warnings only fueled their curiosity. The trail into the hollow was narrow, flanked by twisted oaks and maples. A fog hung thick, clinging to the ground like a living thing. As they descended, the forest fell silent except for the crunch of their boots on leaves. But soon, subtle sound began, soft murmurs, indistinct at first, growing into coherent whispers calling their names. Mark paused, scanning the mist. "It's just the wind," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Elise shook her head, pointing. Shadows moved between the trees, shapes too tall, too thin, too fluid to be human. Every time they blinked, the figures vanished, only to reappear elsewhere. As they walked deeper, the whispers intensified. At first, they seemed to echo memories. Mark swore he heard his grandmother calling him. Elise recognized the laughter of her childhood friends. But then the whispers grew insistent, demanding, "Follow, stay, come closer." The hollow seemed to twist. Trails that should have led them forward looped back inexplicably. Rocks appeared where there had been none, and trees warped as if bending toward them. The friend's sense of direction disappeared. Compasses spun wildly, and GPS devices failed. Every step forward felt like wading through a dream half-formed, where the forest itself had its own will. Then came the footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling behind them. Each friend tried calling out, but their voices were swallowed by the fog. Shapes emerged, humanoid, faceless, and impossibly thin. They moved with unnatural grace, bending and stretching through the mist. Elise screamed when one of them brushed past her. Cold as ice, leaving her skin tingling and numb. In desperation, they ran. Every direction seemed to lead back into the hollow, the whispers chasing them, mingling with the creaking of branches and the low moan of the wind. Mark spotted a small creek and, thinking a landmark, tried to follow upstream, hoping it would lead them out. The others followed, but the hollow seemed to react. Shadows clustering to block the way, whispers forming into words they couldn't comprehend, but understood as warnings. Do not leave. Do not escape. Hours, or perhaps minutes. Time seemed meaningless. Later, they stumbled onto an old cabin, half collapsed, hidden in the fog. Inside, they found remnants of previous travelers. Tattered clothing, rusted equipment, and carved warnings. You are never alone. The hollow remembers. As dawn approached, the fog thinned, and the hollow reluctantly released them. They emerged at the edge of the ridge, shaking, pale, and silent. None spoke of what they had seen in detail. Those who had been to the hollow rarely do. But the memories stayed. Whispers that echo in the mind, shadows that stretch at the periphery of vision, and the unnerving sensation of being followed long after leaving. Locals say the Hollow of Lost Echoes is a place where the dead, the lost, and the restless converge. The October fog awakens the whispers, and the hollow waits patiently for anyone bold or foolish enough to enter. Some never return. Others escape, but carry the hollow within them, a shadow in their mind that whispers in quiet moments, reminding them that in Appalachia, the past is never dead, and some places never forget. Mark, Elise, and the others never spoke it openly, but each year when October comes, they feel the hollows pull in their dreams, the whispers rise with the wind, soft and insistent. We remember you. Deep in the Appalachian forest of Virginia lies Raven's Hollow, a place locals avoid once the leaves begin to fall. In October, a chill hangs over the hollow, thick with mist and the scent of decaying foliage. The trees are gnarled, twisted, and their branches reach down like skeletal fingers. The hollow carries a history older than the towns in its shadow, a history of disappearances, curses, and a figure known only as the Witch of Raven's Hollow. In 1987, a group of friends, Tyler, Hannah, and two others, dared to explore the hollow, drawn by tales of strange lights and spectral voices. They hiked deep into the forest, their flashlights cutting swaths through the darkness. At first, all seemed ordinary. The crunch of leaves beneath boots, the distant cry of an owl, and the occasional rustle of unseen animals. But as twilight fell, the forest began to change. The wind died, leaving an unnatural stillness. Shadows seemed to shift independently of the light, and the air grew thick, heavy with anticipation. Tyler stopped abruptly. Ahead, a small cabin appeared, though it wasn't on any map. The structure was dilapidated, covered in moss and dark stains, its door slightly ajar. As they approached, the door creaked open wider, seemingly inviting them in. Hannah hesitated. "Maybe we shouldn't," she began, but Tyler, ever curious, stepped inside. The others followed reluctantly. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of herbs, smoke, and something metallic. Strange symbols were etched into the walls, floor, and ceiling, circles, lines, and sigils that seemed to pulse faintly in the flashlight glow. Then came the sound, a low, crooning chant, melodic yet unsettling. The friends froze. From the shadows, a figure emerged. She was tall, her back hunched, hair long and tangled, and eyes black as the void. Her fingers were long and tipped with dirt-encrusted nails. The room seemed to warp around her, the air pressing against them like a living thing. "You shouldn't be here," the figure hissed, voice like dry leaves scraping together. The friends tried to back away, but the door slammed shut with a force that rattled the walls. The symbols glowed faintly, casting grotesque shadows that danced and writhed across the floor. The chant grew louder, echoing inside their skulls. Panic took over. Tyler grabbed a chair, throwing it at the figure, but it passed through her as though she were made of mist. The friends screamed, stumbling toward the door, but the cabin seemed endless, twisting internally so that every exit led them deeper inside. The witch moved closer, her whispering chant now an unintelligible litany that clawed at their minds. Hours, or perhaps minutes, passed, though time felt meaningless. Finally, a sudden gust of wind blew through the cabin. scattering papers, herbs, and broken furniture. The figure dissipated like smoke, leaving only the lingering sense of her presence. The door swung open, revealing the foggy hollow outside. The friends ran without looking back, the forest swallowing the cabin from sight. Only later did they learn that the Witch of Raven's hollow was said to have lived in the woods centuries ago. Some claim she made pacts with dark spirits, others that she simply became one with the hollow, eternally guarding its secrets and punishing intruders. Tyler and Hannah never spoke of the encounter publicly, fearing disbelief. But each October, they feel her pull, a shadow at the edge of vision, a whisper brushing their ears when they walk alone at dusk. Locals say the hollow itself hungers for company, and the witch is its guardian, patient, eternal, and hungry for those who trespass. In Appalachia, some spirits linger in the trees, in the fog, in the shadows. The Witch of Raven's hollow is one of them, a sentinel of sorrow, waiting for the curious to cross the wrong threshold on a chilly October night. And if you hear a low, crooning chant among the trees, beware, she may be closer than you think. There are stretches of Appalachia where the hills themselves seem to breathe, where fog curls on the earth like smoke and every shadow feels alive. Devil's Backbone Ridge in eastern Tennessee is one such place. The ridge got its name from its jagged formation, a narrow spine of rock that twists above the valley. Locals say it's cursed ground, where miners once vanished and where on October nights a sound like weeping echoes through the trees. Tom Barlow, a wildlife photographer, had heard the legends all his life. He didn't believe them. Ghost stories were good for scaring kids, not grown men. But one October evening, curiosity got the better of him. Armed with his camera, a headlamp, and a stubborn sense of skepticism, he hiked toward the ridge at dusk, determined to capture whatever it was people heard crying in the dark. The forest was unusually still. No crickets, no birds, only the crunch of Tom's boots and the occasional rustle of wind. As he climbed, the trees grew denser, their branches interlocking above him. The light faded fast, shadows thickening until the woods were nearly black. His headlamp cut through the dark, but only barely. Then he heard it, faint at first, a soft sobbing sound, drifting through the trees. He stopped, heart thudding. It sounded human, a woman crying. He called out, "Hello? Are you hurt?" No answer. The crying continued, low and broken, echoing from somewhere up the ridge. Tom pushed forward, the sound growing louder but no closer, as though the forest itself carried it on unseen currents. His camera picked up strange flickers of light, mist moving against the wind, shapes vanishing as soon as he turned. He reached a small clearing where the moonlight broke through, and there she was. A woman sat on a boulder at the edge of the clearing, shoulders shaking as she cried. Her long hair hung like a curtain, and her dress, once white, now filthy and torn, clung to her thin frame. "Miss," Tom said softly. She didn't react. He stepped closer, camera raised. "I can help you. Are you lost?" The woman stopped crying. Slowly, unnaturally, she turned her head toward him. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow pits that gleamed faintly with reflected light. Tom froze. Then she smiled, a slow, stretching smile that cracked her cheeks. A sound like wind whistled through the trees, but it wasn't wind. It was laughter. The woman rose without standing, gliding a few inches above the ground. Her movements were jerky, her body bending in impossible ways as she advanced. Tom stumbled backward, tripping over roots. His camera flashed, capturing a blur of motion and a streak of white mist. The woman's crying turned into shrieking, high and shrill, echoing across the ridge. He ran, branches toward his clothes, roots caught his boots, but adrenaline drove him forward. The shrieking followed, never closer, never farther. The forest warped around him, the path vanishing and reappearing. He could feel her presence behind him, a coldness like breath on his neck, a whisper brushing his ear. "Stay with me." When he burst out of the forest at last, gasping, dawn was breaking. His camera was gone, his headlamp shattered. He never remembered how he found his car, only that he drove for hours before realizing his hands were shaking so violently he could barely hold the wheel. Days later, when he returned to Ridge in daylight with a friend, the forest looked ordinary, peaceful, even. But in the clearing where he'd seen her, they found something strange. His camera, lying on the ground, untouched by rain or dirt. The lens was cracked, and the final photo was a blur of white mist, but within it, faintly, a face could be seen. Hollow eyes, a wide, cracked smile. Local legends say the crying thing is a ghost of a woman who lost her family to a mine collapse in the 1800s. Her grief turned to madness, and she wandered the ridge until she disappeared. Some say her spirit still searches for her loved ones, mistaking the living for the dead. Others claim she is no ghost at all, but something older, an echo of sorrow that the mountains themselves brought to life. Tom never went back to Devil's Backbone Ridge. Yet each October, when the wind rises through the valleys, the sound of weeping drift from the hills, low, mournful, and unmistakably human. Those who hear it say can follow you home, linger in your dreams, waiting for you to answer. In Appalachia, the mountains remember pain, and sometimes that pain takes form, crying through the night, calling out for company among the endless dark ridges. By late October, the Appalachian nights turn cold and restless. The mist grows thicker, the forest quieter, and stories, those whispered around campfires and porches, become heavier, darker. The locals say it's a time when the veil between worlds thins, when the old things that live in the mountains stir. And nowhere is that truer than in Black Hollow. The hollow lies deep in the heart of West Virginia, where no road runs straight and no map tells the truth. People who wander there talk about strange lights that hover between the trees, pale, flickering glows that move like lanterns held by invisible hands. They call them the last lights, and say following them means you'll never come back. One man, Ethan Graves, a forest ranger stationed nearby, learned that truth the hard way. It started with a missing family. A car was found abandoned near the edge of Black Hollow. Doors open, headlights dead, no footprints beyond the tree line. Ethan and 2 other rangers were sent to investigate before nightfall. They found nothing but silence. The deeper they went, the more the forest seemed to press around them, swallowing sound. As dusk fell, fog rolled in like smoke. That's when Ethan saw the first light, small and white, bobbing gently through the trees ahead. "Over here," he called, thinking it might be a flashlight. But when he ran toward it, it drifted farther away, always just out of reach. The other rangers shouted for him to stop, but their voices sounded distant, muffled, as if coming through thick water. When Ethan turned, they were gone. The forest was darker than it should have been. The light pulsed again, closer this time, and faintly, over the rustle of leaves, he heard something else, a whisper. It said his name. "Ethan." He froze. The voice was familiar, his wife's, but she died 3 years ago in a car accident. The light brightened, hovering like a will-o'-the-wisp, then split into several smaller orbs that danced in slow, spiraling motions around him. Each one seemed to hum with a faint, mournful tone, and for a moment he swore he saw faces within them, faces twisted in fear or grief or pleading. He stumbled backward, heart racing, flashlight trembling in his hand. Behind him came the crunch of footsteps, slow, deliberate, heavy. He turned and saw shapes emerging from the mist. People, or what had once been people. Their eyes glowed faintly, their skin as pale as the fog that wrapped around them. They moved with the strange, jerking motion of marionettes. Ethan raised his flashlight, but the beam flickered and died. The light orbs pulsed brighter, illuminating dozens of faces in the darkness, all staring, all whispering his name. He ran. The forest seemed endless. Roots coiled like serpents. Branches reached down like arms. The whispers followed, merging into a low chant. "Stay, stay, stay." His lungs burned, his vision blurred. Then ahead, through the mist, he saw something impossible, a house. Not a ranger's cabin, but an old, 2-story home with lanterns burning in the windows. He burst inside, slamming the door behind him. The air inside was warm, filled with the scent of pine and smoke. For a moment, relief washed over him. But then he noticed the photographs on the wall, black and white portraits of men and women, each one with eyes scratched out. Footsteps creaked upstairs. Ethan called out, voice shaking. No answer. The floorboards above groaned as something heavy moved. He turned toward the door, but where the door had been, there was only wall. The windows had vanished too. Only the photographs remained, and in each one, the scratched-out faces now stared directly at him. Outside, the lights gathered the windows, pressing against the glass, glowing brighter and brighter until the house was bathed in a ghostly white. The photographs began to whisper, their voices overlapping, frantic. We followed the lights. Don't look at them. Don't. Then everything went white. When the search team found the house days later, it was little more than a ruin. Rotted beams, collapsed roof, and no sign of Ethan. But his radio was discovered buried in the dirt outside. When investigators played it back, they heard static, and beneath it, faintly, a voice. Stay away from the lights. The tape ends with sound like wind, or maybe whispers. Now, locals say that on October nights, when fog fills Black Hollow, you can still see the lights drifting between the trees. Sometimes they form a trail, leading deeper into the mist. And if you listen closely, you might hear a man's voice warning from somewhere far away. Turn back. Don't follow the lights. Because those who do never leave the hollow, the mountains keep them. Their lights become part of the others, forever wandering, forever whispering, forever lost. And so ends the story of Black Hollow. The final whisper in the dark heart of Appalachia, where the line between life and death is thinner than the mist that drifts between the trees.